Have you ever wondered what might be hidden behind a sweet smile? Not that of a random stranger, but that of someone you trust with the most precious thing you have, your children. Imagine the police raiding a quiet house in an ordinary neighborhood, one where silence seems synonymous with peace. Inside, everything seems normal, until a door opens and the air shifts. On a shelf, carefully lined up, are dozens of small glass bottles, each with a handwritten label and a thick, dark red liquid. Inside, it wasn't paint, it wasn't wine, it was blood, children's blood. The scene seemed like something out of a nightmare, but it wasn't fiction. It was real. The police didn't know if they were looking at an altar, an experiment, or something even darker. All they knew was that those little bottles belonged to a woman known to everyone as the best babysitter in the neighborhood. Polite, attentive, always with a soft tone of voice and a serene look. No one ever imagined what happened when the lights went out and the children slept. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover could completely change the way you look at people who seem the most harmless. This story, the one about Nanny, who kept the children's blood in glass bottles, it's not just a criminal case. It's a disturbing portrait of how far human darkness can reach when no one is looking. They say evil doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers sweetly. Sometimes it sits at the foot of the bed and sings a lullaby. This woman did this every night, as the clock ticked and the houses fell asleep. The parents trusted her blindly. They left the keys, the money for dinner, and their children's lives in her hands. No one suspected that constant calm, that methodical way of keeping everything clean, organized, perfect, nor the faint metallic smell that occasionally escaped from the small basement where she said she kept her old toys. Until one day, one of these toys started dripping, and that's when the secret came out. But what led her to do this? Why would a seemingly normal babysitter collect blood as souvenirs? Was it a ritual, a mental illness, or something even darker? Some neighbors claimed to have seen her talking to herself in front of an old photograph. Others said they heard whispers coming from the house as if she were praying. The truth is that no one wanted to believe it until it was too late. In police records, the bottles were labeled with names, ages, and dates. Some belonged to children who were still alive, others to little ones who had mysteriously fallen ill months before. The most disturbing thing is that there were bottles with future dates, as if she already knew when she would need more blood. When questioned, she smiled, didn't cry, it didn't tremble. He didn't ask for a lawyer. He just said one sentence that still haunts investigators today. I didn't take anything from them. I just kept what they'll want back one day. Did she really believe she was doing something good? Or did he feed on the feeling of power over innocence? No one knows for sure. All that is known is that since that night, the house has been sealed, but the rumors never stopped. Some say you can still hear the clinking of bottles coming from inside the walls. Others swear that on the basement shelf there is still a label with no name, and that's exactly where it begins, the story that nobody wanted to tell. Would you trust your children to someone who seems too perfect? A woman who's never late, who cooks well, sings lullabies, and treats children as if they were her own. At first glance, she would be every mother's dream, the kind of person who inspires confidence just by looking at her. But sometimes danger doesn't scream, it smiles. And it was precisely behind that calm, polite smile that one of the most disturbing secrets an entire neighborhood has ever witnessed lurked. Her name was synonymous with tranquility. When someone needed a nanny, it was the first name that came to mind. Call Clara, she's an angel with children. And indeed, that's what everyone saw. An angel. Light-colored dresses, impeccable posture, serene gaze, soft voice. The children adored her. The parents idolized her. There was something almost hypnotic about her, an aura of kindness so convincing that no one ever imagined that, behind that appearance, there was a mind hiding something terribly dark. Stay with me until the end, because what you discover now may surprise you. Clara, or the perfect nanny as everyone called her, had an exemplary routine. She arrived early, made the children's breakfast, organized toys by color and size, and wrote down in a notebook everything they ate, did, and dreamed about. Yes, even their dreams. He said he enjoyed understanding the little one's inner world. Sometimes he wrote phrases like, "Today he dreamed about the sea," or he cried in the middle of the night and asked for his mother. Things that seemed tender, but that over time would take on a much more disturbing meaning. She never raised her voice, never showed anger. Even when something went wrong, she maintained that constant, almost inhuman calm. Some parents even said, "It doesn't even seem real. It's as if nothing phases her." And it really didn't, because inside her, emotions no longer existed. Only a sick, cold curiosity, disguised as affection, remained. As the months passed, small coincidences began to appear. The children in her care had tiny cuts that no one could explain. "They must have scratched themselves while playing," Clara would say, ever so gently. Sometimes there were subtle stains on their clothes, something almost imperceptible. But no one suspected anything. After all, who would suspect a woman who dedicated her life to caring for children who weren't hers? Have you ever blindly trusted someone, believing they would never harm anyone? Well, that's exactly what happened there. The entire neighborhood defended her, and any rumors of something strange were hushed up with phrases like, "You're exaggerating," or "She would never do something like that." Evil hid in plain sight, disguised as virtue, zeal, love. Some mothers even said that when they left their children with her, they felt an inexplicable peace, a feeling that nothing bad could happen. Little did they know that while they trusted her, something much deeper and more disturbing was being carefully planned. A neighbor once told of seeing Clara late one night, sitting on her porch, balancing a small glass bottle in her hands, staring into it. She thought it was perfume or some medicine, but the moonlight's reflection revealed a different color, a reddish hue that didn't match either. Rumors began to spread, but no one had the courage to ask questions. After all, how could you accuse an exemplary woman? How could you doubt someone who seemed pure? It was easier to pretend nothing was happening. And so, for years, the perfect nanny continued her work. She continued smiling, waving to neighbors, taking the children to the park. Everything seemed normal, until the day a mother came home early and saw something she could never erase from her memory. But that's what you're going to find out next. Do you believe someone is born cruel, or is transformed that way because of their experiences? This is one of those questions that seems simple, until you learn the story of a woman like Clara, the nanny who kept the children's blood in small glass bottles. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover now may forever change the way you view evil. Before being called a monster, Clara was just a girl. Small, fragile, raised in a home where silence was synonymous with fear. Her authoritarian father believed that education was the same as punishment. Her submissive mother observed everything in silence, and silence for a child is the cruelest sound of all. In that environment, affection was rationed and love was a privilege. Clara grew up learning that pain and attention were inseparable. Have you ever felt like somehow the past never truly let you go? For her, it became a distorted mirror, reflecting everything she'd lost. When she finally left home, she swore to herself she'd never hurt anyone. She wanted to care, to protect, to be everything her mother couldn't be, and that's how she found work as a nanny. But trauma doesn't disappear when you move. It transforms. It disguises itself. According to forensic psychologists who studied the case, Clara developed a behavior of affective transference, where she saw in children a purity she never had. Her obsession began almost innocently, saving a strand of hair, a drawing, a baby tooth. Small mementos that for her symbolized eternal childhood, a time she wanted to capture and keep forever. But something inside her broke, and what once seemed tender became a ritual of possession. Blood was proof of innocence. she would later explain during an interrogation, the only pure peace the world hadn't yet contaminated. Cold words, spoken with a disturbing calm. Criminology experts claim she associated blood with childhood purity, a sick attempt to preserve the innocence she herself had lost. It was as if, by preserving those little bottles, Clara believed she was saving something beautiful from life's inevitable decay. What you're about to hear may seem impossible, but according to investigators, she treated those bottles with the same care a mother would a child. She cleaned them, labeled them with names and dates, and placed them on a shelf, always in the same order. It was her collection of pure memories. No blood was wasted. Every drop had meaning. Every vial represented a memory she swore to protect. Stay with me until the end, because understanding Clara is to face the darkest side of humanity, the one that mixes love and cruelty in equal measure. When experts examined her diary, they found phrases that sounded like poetic confessions. They sleep and I watch over them. Every heartbeat is a promise I keep with me. Between the lines, there was no guilt, just a logic of its own, an internal world where good and evil blurred until they no longer had boundaries. For the psychologists who evaluated her, Clara was not driven by hate. She was driven by obsession with purity, a woman who spent her life trying to rebuild in other children the childhood that fate stole from her. But in her attempt to preserve her innocence, she ended up destroying everything that was innocent, and perhaps that is the scariest thing about this story. Evil, sometimes, is not born from the desire to hurt, but from the desperate attempt to love in the wrong way. And it was exactly this search, unhealthy, silent, and irreversible, that led her to the point where nothing made sense anymore. But what she really thought she was doing is what you'll find out next. Have you ever wondered what someone is capable of doing when they believe they are protecting what they love? Sometimes horror isn't born of malice, but of a distorted idea of care. And in the case of Clara, the nanny who kept the children's blood in glass bottles, this care became something that surpassed any human limit. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover now might leave you breathless. During the day, she was the picture of serenity. She baked cookies, helped with homework, and told stories. At night, when the houses fell silent and the streets fell asleep, the ritual began. The same ritual she had repeated for years, meticulous, cold, almost sacred. In the children's room, the dim light from the lamp cast soft shadows on the walls. Clara approached slowly, as if about to kiss a sleeping child. But in her hands was something different, a small needle, clean, sterilized, wrapped in a white cloth. Nothing in her gestures was rushed. Every movement was studied, precise. She touched the child's arm with the delicacy of someone afraid of waking her. A small cut, a drop, then another, and another. The blood flowed calmly, and she collected it with a glass pipette, transferring it to a tiny bottle that seemed to glow in the yellow light. The sound of the bottle being capped was barely audible, a soft click that sealed another fragment of preserved innocence. Have you ever felt like something seemingly harmless hides a terrible secret? For Clara, that ritual was anything but evil. She believed she was. Guarding what was pure, saving a part of the children before the world corrupted them. It was her twisted way of loving, a love that suffocates, that imprisons, that hurts in silence. No one suspected. The children would wake up with a small bandage on their arm, thinking they'd hurt themselves playing. Clara would smile and say it was just a scratch. And so the ritual repeated itself, every week, always at the same time, always in the same room, always with the same calm. The bottles accumulated, some hidden in shoeboxes, others tucked behind books, and the most important, as she called them, were displayed on a wooden shelf covered by a lace curtain. The vials were all labeled. They bore names, dates, and even small notes. Easy laugh, calm gaze, dreams of the sea. As if each sample represented a part of the souls of the children she cared for. Experts would later say it was an attempt at absolute control, a symbolic way of dominating life through blood. For Clara, however, it was different. She said those bottles sang to her at night, that the liquid inside them was alive, that it pulsed. What you're about to hear may seem impossible, but there were nights when she spent hours observing the little bottles, moving them around, cleaning each one as if they were sacred relics. It was as if she were tending a private altar, a shrine of blood and silence. None of the children died in years. She knew exactly how much to remove, how much to preserve, until the day something went wrong. The girl's name was Helena. She was 6 years old and Clara's favorite. That night, something inside the nanny seemed to shift. Maybe it was exhaustion, maybe it was fear of losing control, or maybe just the desire to hold on a little longer. The room fell silent, and Clara, for the first time, didn't go to work. When the parents arrived and opened the door, they found the girl sleeping, very pale. And beside the bed, a new bottle, still warm, with a label different from all the others, but what was written on it is what you will discover next. Have you ever stopped to think about the exact moment the mask slips, and everything that seemed normal reveals something impossible to ignore? It was like this. An ordinary afternoon, children playing in the living room, the nanny preparing a simple snack in the kitchen. Suddenly, a dull sound. A small body gives way. The girl faints. A 2-second silence. Then, screams. And from that moment on, nothing was ever the same again. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover now may surprise you. The race to the hospital was quick, but the fear was quicker. At the emergency room, the doctors were surprised by the signs: extreme pallor, dizziness, irregular heartbeat. No fever, no apparent trauma, a condition that looked like acute anemia, but with no history to justify it. Tests, blood pressure, oxygen. While the team organized themselves, the nanny maintained her usual polite calm, that serenity that had made her the best in the neighborhood. And that's precisely where the true crime begins to come out of the shadows, small details that, added together, trigger an alert. Have you ever experienced this? Feeling something is wrong, but not knowing how to name it? The doctors decided to investigate beyond the obvious. The medical history revealed a sequence of similar discrete episodes occurring after nights with the same caregiver. Coincidence? Perhaps. Until an examination revealed signs consistent with recurring blood loss. Not an accident, a pattern. The hospital notifies the authorities. Protocol. Police investigation underway. The police arrive at the house discreetly. First questions, then a warrant. Neighbors watch from behind the curtains, whispers. No one wants to believe it. After all, we're talking about that careful, polite woman with an impeccable reputation. The perfect nanny. The pace quickens. The door is open, the place is tidy, the smell of cleaning. Products. Nothing is out of place. Almost too perfect. The researchers start with the obvious. Rooms, closets, drawers. Nothing. They descend to the kitchen level. The pantry. A subtle warning in the air. An odor that doesn't match seasoning. When the researchers opened the pantry cabinet, the metallic smell betrayed the secret. Behind labeled jars, a false shelf, and behind it, what transforms unsolved mystery in a case of little-known serial killer. Several small glass bottles, lined up, with handwritten labels, names, dates, short notes. The dark red liquid, thick still, and yet disturbingly alive. Blood. The scene is treated like a crime scene. Photography, cataloguing, gloves, tweezers. The method reveals coldness and habit. It wasn't the first time, nor the second. The bottles tell a silent chronology. Some are months apart, others week by week, as if someone were tracking a collection. What you're about to discover now may surprise you. Between the bottles, short messages. Sleep well, didn't cry, smiled while listening to music. Notes that blend care and control, love and dominance, purity and possession. A community goes into emotional collapse. Parents are confused, neighbors are outraged, people defend her, people accuse her. Impossible. She would never do that. Shock turns to anger, anger turns to fear, and fear brings back memories, small bandages that no one explained, discreet bruises, the caregiver's exaggerated calm in the face of any unexpected event. Suddenly everything makes sense. Too late. The police collect the bottles. The lab confirms what no one wanted to hear, samples compatible with multiple children. The girl who fainted recovers, but the question remains, why? What would lead someone to collect and store blood with such care? The answer isn't just in the evidence, it's in the pattern, the timing, the ritual, the way the bottles were arranged by importance. The forensic team talks about method, signature, intent. The criminologists about control and a purity fetish. The prosecutor about evidence. Each sees a fragment. Together, they construct a chilling picture. Have you ever blindly trusted someone because they seemed perfect? That's what we're talking about. How evil can wear a clean apron, smile sweetly, and schedule horror like someone planning their week's schedule. How a story of true crime, it arises from everyday life and turns into a nightmare when the police connect the dots. The nanny is taken to the police station. She doesn't resist. She doesn't cry. She watches the boxes leave the house as if they were just kitchen utensils. Outside, cameras, murmurs, cell phones at the ready. Inside, something else begins. Testimonies, forensic examinations, cross-referencing data, reconstructing the bottle's path to the hidden shelf. Every step closer to what really happened in that seemingly perfect house. And it's at that exact point, between the whisper of the closet and the rattle of the handcuffs, that the story shifts gears. Because what the nanny said in the first interrogation and what the forensic experts found at the bottom of a box no one had seen is what you'll discover next. Do you believe that madness can be measured, diagnosed, or are there things that simply don't fit into any report? When the case of babysitter of the bottles, when she arrived at the courthouse, the entire country already knew her face. A docile-looking woman, sitting before the judges with her hands folded as if awaiting the results of a school test. But there was no innocence to be proven, only the enigma of a mind no one seemed capable of understanding. Stay with me until the end, because what you'll discover now may surprise you. The courtroom was packed. Reporters, curious onlookers, mothers who had once entrusted their children to her. Everyone wanted to hear it from her own mouth. Clara, why? Why collect blood? Why save it? Why children? But the answer never came directly. Sometimes she smiled, as if hearing a distant voice. Other times she responded with short, rambling sentences that left the jurors speechless. "They're still with me," he muttered at one point, staring into space. Forensic psychiatrists were the first to speak out. The report classified her behavior as the result of a severe dissociative disorder, aggravated by years of trauma and isolation. According to the experts, Clara believed that each bottle contained a fragment of purity, something the world corrupted, but she, in her mind, was capable of preserving. There was no malice, said one of the experts. There was devotion, a devotion that surpassed any moral or human limits. Have you ever wondered how far the mind can go when it tries to justify the unjustifiable? To many, she was a monster. To others, a victim of her own madness. The debate dominated the news, criminal courts, and even university halls. The case divided opinions. Was it illness or was it coldness? The prosecution, merciless, showed images of the crime scene. The bottles, the name tags, the dates, the pattern of repetition. The defense, however, insisted Clara didn't understand what she was doing. She wasn't a murderer. She was a woman trapped inside her own mind. During the trial, one detail caught the investigators' attention and was never explained. Among the dozens of bottles collected, some had labels with future dates, days and months that hadn't even happened yet. When the experts questioned Clara about this, she simply responded softly, "These are the promises I haven't kept yet." Not even the experts could decipher what it meant. Had she planned new victims? Was it a symbolic delusion, a calendar of invented memories, or something no one could foresee? The bottles were sent for further analysis, and nothing about them seemed different from the others. The same blood type, the same care, the same impeccable handwriting. Only the dates were out of place, as if time for Clara had stopped, following the rules of the rest of the world. During interrogations, she appeared calm, sometimes even kind to the agents. She called them by name, asked if they had children, if they slept well, a serenity that caused more fear than fury. The chief psychiatrist described her as someone living in a space between faith and insanity, where everything makes sense, except to us. The sentence came after weeks of intense debate, life imprisonment with mandatory psychiatric monitoring. Upon hearing the verdict, Clara simply lowered her head and whispered something inaudible. No microphone picked it up. Only the lawyer next to her later claimed to have understood 3 words: "They still wait." Have you ever felt that shiver that comes not from fear, but from doubt? The doubt that maybe something is still happening, even after everyone believes it's over. Well, that's exactly how this case ends. Or maybe it never ended. To this day, in criminal records, the little bottles with future dates remain sealed, stored in an evidence room. And no one, not even the most experienced experts, has been able to explain what they mean. And the most disturbing thing is that, a year after the arrest, a new bottle appeared, with the same type of label, the same handwriting, and a date that is yet to come. Have you ever trusted someone without question? Someone who seemed too kind, too perfect, incapable of harming a fly? Maybe a neighbor, a teacher, a babysitter. The truth is, evil rarely arrives with red eyes and sharp teeth. Sometimes it arrives with flowers, with a sweet voice, with a smile that inspires security. And that's precisely what makes it so dangerous. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover now could change the way you see the people around you. The case of Babysitter of the Blood Bottles left deep scars, not only on the families involved, but also on everyone who heard their story. For months, the media tried to understand, experts tried to explain, and society tried to forget. But how can we forget something that destroys the very idea of trust? How can we erase from our minds the fact that someone capable of comforting a crying child could also, in the same gesture, do something so terrible? Sometimes horror lies not in the brutality of an act, but in the contrast between appearance and truth. Clara, the woman the entire neighborhood called the perfect nanny, became a symbol of this. She didn't hide in the shadows. She didn't live in isolation. She didn't inspire fear. On the contrary, she was the neighbor who offered help, who smiled at the market, who said good morning to everyone. And it was precisely this disguise of normality that allowed her darkness to go unnoticed for so long. Have you ever wondered how many people like this pass us by every day? How often do we look at someone and see only what we want to see? Kindness, kindness, calm, without imagining what lies behind. Clara's case isn't just a crime story. It's a mirror, a cruel reflection of how the human mind can separate emotion from morality, love from control, care from destruction. Behavioral experts say that individuals like her don't act out of hatred, but rather out of the belief that they're doing the right thing. For them, evil is a distortion of good. And perhaps this is the most frightening thing, realizing that for some people, the line between right and wrong simply doesn't exist. It's a blurred, invisible line that shifts, depending on what they feel or believe. Stay with me until the end, because what this case reveals goes far beyond a detective story. It forces us to think about what we truly know about people, and even more so, what we know about ourselves. How far would you go to protect what you love? And to what extent can good intentions turn into something destructive? Psychologists who studied Clara say she believed she was preserving something pure, an innocence the world was killing. But deep down, she wasn't just trying to save the children, she was trying to save herself, as if, by capturing what was pure in others, she could rebuild what she'd lost in herself. A sick form of redemption, a quest for control disguised as love. But there's something even more disturbing about this story, something that doesn't appear in the reports or the news. It's the silence of the people who knew her. All the parents, neighbors, and friends who said, "She would never do that." Ordinary people who to this day wonder how they missed the signs, because deep down, the true terror may not lie in what Clara did, but in what no one saw. Have you ever thought about this? How many calm faces and soft voices can hide intentions we never imagined? How many good people cross our path every day, wearing the perfect disguise of normality? And it is exactly this question that continues to echo even after years. How far can someone pretend to be good? And how many people like her are still out there, behind kind faces and calm smiles? But before you try to answer, take a deep breath, because what comes next may make you look at the world with different eyes. Have you ever noticed how stories like this force us to look within? Sometimes what's most frightening isn't the crime itself, but the similarity between what we feel and what we deny. Because in some way we've all believed in someone who didn't deserve it. We've all trusted a smile that hid something, maybe out of necessity, maybe out of hope. And that's why stories like Clara's resonate so deeply with us, because they speak not only of the evil that comes from without, but of the silent fear we carry within. If this topic makes sense to you, if in some way this story made you think about something, leave here in the comments what touched you the most. It could be a memory, a reflection, or even a question about what makes someone lose their sense of right and wrong. I read every comment, and that's where the most intense conversations happen between people who, like you, aren't afraid to face the darker side of the human mind. And if you've made it this far, it's because something in this story has captivated you. So like this video now, because this simple gesture shows that it's worth continuing to bring you real, dark, and mysterious stories like this one. Every like helps the channel grow, reaching more people who also seek to understand the secrets the world tries to hide. It is clear. Subscribe to the channel, not just to keep up with what's next, but because each new story is a new window into the inexplicable. Here, we delve deep into the minds no one wants to understand, into the cases time has tried to bury, into the truths that frighten, because they're all too human. Your presence here makes a difference, truly. After all, this space is more than a channel. It's a community of curious, restless people who want to understand what lies beneath the surface. So, comment, like, subscribe, and come with me, because what follows will make you see evil and innocence in a light you may never have seen before. Have you ever felt that shiver that comes when something inside you tells you something's wrong, but the world around you seems to insist everything is fine? That's exactly how the story no one wanted to tell began. An ordinary house in an ordinary neighborhood, with white curtains fluttering in the windows and the smell of freshly baked cake wafting from the kitchen. Everything seemed perfect until the day the police arrived. The connection was made by a neighbor, one of those ladies who notice everything but never imagine what they're about to discover. She said she heard a strange sound coming from the house next door, a repetitive metallic rattle, as if something made of glass were being carefully placed on a shelf. The sound repeated night after night, always at the same time, and that day, instinct spoke louder. When the police broke down the door, the air inside, the house felt heavy, almost palpable, as if the environment itself had absorbed something that didn't want to be revealed. The smell came first, a metallic, sweet, and cloying odor that spread through the hallway. The officers followed the trail to a locked room. One of them later described pushing the door open and feeling his heart slow down. A profound silence fell over the house, as if the outside world had stopped to watch what would happen next. On the wall was a shelf with dozens of small, Glass bottles, all the same size, lined up with almost obsessive precision. Some were full, others half full. All had handwritten labels, names, ages, dates. The liquid inside was thick, dark, and seemed to glow in the dim light of the flashlight. For a moment, no one moved, until one of the officers whispered, "That's blood." From that moment on, the case took a turn that defied all logic. How had no one noticed before? How could such a calm woman, so beloved by her neighbors, hide something so disturbing behind seemingly innocent doors? Her name was Clara, and for many she was the picture of perfection. She cared for children as if they were her own, smiled sweetly, and brought flowers to mothers on Mother's Day. But inside her something was broken, an invisible deep fissure that turned love into obsession and tenderness into control. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because understanding Clara is understanding the most fragile and dark side of the human mind. She didn't start out as a villain. Nobody does. Her life seemed like a journey of trial and error, a constant search for meaning, for a kind of purity the world never gave her back. The problem is, somewhere along the way, this search became a prison. And within this prison, Clara convinced herself that saving the children's innocence was the only way to redeem herself. Neighbors said she had strange habits, but nothing that seemed dangerous. Sometimes she'd sweep the yard at night. Other times, she'd sit on the porch staring blankly into space, clutching one of her bottles as if it were an object of faith. Some said they'd seen her talking to herself, whispering names, but no one wanted to believe her. After all, who would dare suspect the woman who cared for the entire neighborhood's children? This is the most disturbing part, the normality, the disguise, the human capacity to hide the abyss behind a smile. Clara lived among people, but not with them. She created her own world, silent and orderly, where each little bottle represented a memory she refused to let go. It was as if she were building a collection of purity, a museum of liquid innocence. And the more she kept, the emptier she became. The police spent days inside the house, cataloguing everything. Besides the bottles, they found notebooks, notes on the children's schedules, pulses, dreams, and fears. There were pages written in childish handwriting, interspersed with her own phrases, phrases that sounded like prayers. "They sleep peacefully now. I'll keep what's theirs before the world takes it." Words that couldn't fit between reason and delirium. The news spread like wildfire. Headlines screamed, neighbors wept, reporters crowded the sidewalks. Everyone searched for answers, but perhaps there were none, because sometimes horror comes not from evil, but from the absence of limits. Clara didn't seem to feel guilt, anger, or pleasure. She felt duty, and that's what makes this story so uncomfortable. Evil, done with conviction. As she was led away by the police, she didn't resist. She looked back one last time at the bottle room and said something no one has forgotten. Now they are safe. And perhaps deep down, that was what frightened him most. The serenity, the certainty, the conviction that he had done something right. This story isn't just about crime. It's about transformation, about the invisible limits of human mentality, about how the desire to protect can turn into destruction. It's about decisions made in the dark and hidden truths that time insists on revealing. When we think of Clara, we also think of ourselves, of how we all hide parts we don't show, of how appearances comfort us, even when the truth is whispering behind them. And in the end, perhaps the real mystery lies not in the bottles, but in the mind that believed it was saving the world while, without realizing it, it was silently destroying it. Comment here. That makes sense to me. Have you ever noticed how the most seemingly harmless people are sometimes the ones hiding the darkest secrets? Clara was exactly that, the woman everyone wanted around. Kind, polite, calm, with that kind of look that conveys instant trust. The kind of person who makes you let your guard down without realizing it. The neighborhood mothers described her as an angel. She has a gift with children, they said. And she really did, but no one imagined the price of that gift. She arrived early, always punctual, with her hair tied in a simple bun and the same serene smile. She carried a small lunchbox, a wide-mouthed glass bottle, which she said she used to store natural juices, and a brown notebook where she wrote down everything the children did. Sometimes the mothers would joke, "Clara is more organized than we are." She would laugh shyly and reply, "It's just that children need routine. Routine keeps the soul clean." That was the word she used most often, cleaning, and no one saw anything strange about it. The children adored her. They loved her voice, the way she told stories, the patient way she explained things. When one of them fell and hurt herself, Clara was the one who bandaged the wound, softly singing a lullaby no one recognized. "That song is old," she would say. "My mother used to sing it to me." But no one knew anything about her mother, or where she came from, or why she never received visitors. Now I want to delve even deeper into this, because what makes this story so disturbing isn't what Clara did, but how she did it. She wasn't the kind of person to arouse suspicion. There was a restrained sweetness about her, almost rehearsed, as if every gesture was carefully calculated to appear natural. It was like watching an actress play the role of the perfect woman. And the more convincing she was, the harder it became to realize it was all just a mask. Psychology calls this a double persona, the ability to create an ideal version of oneself to hide what lies beneath. But Clara didn't just pretend for others. She also pretended for herself. She believed she was good, that she was helping, that she had a purpose. And perhaps that's the scariest part, evil disguised as virtue. Because in her eyes, caring for the children wasn't a job. It was a mission. She watched them constantly, writing down every detail, what they ate, what they dreamed, when they cried. It all seemed like zeal, but it was control. She wanted to understand how purity worked, how innocence behaved, as if she could study it, decipher it, and perhaps capture it. In the notebooks the police later found, there were phrases that today seem like codes for a ritual. Today she laughed without fear. Tomorrow I want to keep this laughter. Every tear is a memory that will be lost if I don't keep it. Can you imagine that? Living next to someone who speaks of love with the same serenity with which she plans the unthinkable? This contrast is what most disturbed those who knew her. Because, until her very last moment, Clara never raised her voice, never showed anger, never at any moment showed a sign of insanity. She was calm, rational, predictable, the kind of person you'd call to look after your children and sleep peacefully. Families trusted her so much that over time they stopped asking questions. She had access to the entire house, to the children's routines, schedules, drawers, medications, everything, and yet nothing seemed out of the ordinary. The danger lay in what no one thought to notice, in the small gestures, in the details that went unnoticed. When a child returned with a small bandage, Clara would explain that it was just a silly little cut. When another said that the nanny took a little blood to take care of the dolls, the parents laughed, amused by the child's imagination. Her perfection was so convincing it became a shield. No one doubted the woman who arrived on time, who organized the snacks, who helped put the toys away. And perhaps that's why it took so long for anyone to realize what was really happening. Evil didn't scream. It whispered in a sweet voice while stroking the children's hair and saying, "What is pure must be guarded." The strangest thing is that even after her arrest, many still defended her. They said there must be some mistake, that it was impossible, that she couldn't be the same woman who baked cupcakes and left sweet notes in children's lunchboxes. That says a lot about our mentality, about how human beings refuse to accept that evil can have a serene face and a soft voice. We prefer to believe in the grotesque monster, the obvious villain. But what about when evil is polite? When it offers help? When it says, "Don't worry, I'll take care of this for you"? This is the hidden truth. What's most disturbing, the danger lurking in normality. Clara wasn't an isolated incident. She was a reflection of something that recurs in society. People who learn to wear masks to survive, to manipulate, to fit in. People who understand that trustworthiness is the best disguise. Now imagine the impact of this. Imagine how many times you've approached someone like this without realizing it. How many times your intuition tried to warn you and you chose to ignore it because there was no point in suspecting. The problem is that evil rarely makes sense. It just needs space, a small space of trust, a distracted glance, an innocent compliment to take hold. And that's when Clara's story stops being just about a nanny and becomes about us, about how we see the world, about the decisions that we make when we choose to trust or pretend we didn't see something strange, about how willing we are to believe what comforts us, even if it's a lie. This story isn't about blood, nor about crime. It's about appearances, about the chasm that can exist between what someone appears to be and what they really are. And the most disturbing thing is that the more perfect Clara seemed, the further everyone was from realizing what she was hiding. Comment here, I'm on that journey too. Sometimes what's most frightening isn't the act itself, but the silent ritual that precedes it, the precision, the calm, the care, because evil, when disguised as routine, becomes almost invisible. And that was precisely what made Clara so dangerous. She wasn't driven by haste or anger. She was methodical, delicate, almost devout. Every movement seemed rehearsed, as if she were fulfilling a sacred duty. Sometimes, outsiders saw only an attentive nanny adjusting a child's blankets. But within that scene lay something more, a hidden intention, a shadow that watched every heartbeat with fascination. The room where everything happened was simple and cozy, a yellowish lamp, neatly organized toys, the smell of soap and baby powder. But when the lights went out and silence fell, the space transformed. Clara moved with a frightening ease, as if each step were part of an ancient choreography. She took a small case, always kept in the same drawer, and from it she removed what she called her care tools, a fine needle, a small tube, a glass pipette. Everything was sterilized, everything was clean, nothing left a trace. The children were fast asleep. She watched them for long minutes before beginning. Their breathing was soft, their faces serene, their skin pale in the dim light. It was as if Clara was searching for the precise moment, an instant of absolute purity, before touching them. Then, with the delicacy of someone, holding something sacred, she made a small, almost imperceptible cut and let a few drops flow. The sound she heard was that of the bottle being filled, slow and steady, to the brim. Then she capped the bottle and stored it in a box lined with white cloth. Nothing was done haphazardly. Clara wrote down everything in her notebook: the day, the time, the quantity, even the child's emotional state that night. Sad, smiled before sleeping, had nightmares, as if each drop held a different meaning. Blood for her wasn't a symbol of death, it was a record of life, a fragment of something pure, needing to be preserved before time corrupted it. Now, I want to go even deeper into this subject, because what Clara did wasn't just a sequence of actions. It was a ritualistic mentality, an obsession disguised as devotion. Experts in criminal behavior claim she didn't see it as a crime, but as an act of love, a gesture of protection. In her twisted mind, saving her blood was the same as saving her soul, an attempt to immortalize something she believed was disappearing from the world: innocence. But what intrigues most is the standard. The bottles were always the same size, the same type of glass, the labels written in the same careful handwriting. There was something almost scientific in her repetition. On Mondays, she chose a different child. On Wednesdays, she cleaned the bottles. On Sundays, she organized everything on shelves, as if revisiting memories. And no one suspected a thing. Mothers saw small bandages and believed them to be scratches from play. The children, in turn, vaguely remembered dreaming of Clara's voice saying, Shh, it'll pass soon. It's just a little piece of you I need to keep. The police investigating the case said they had never seen anything like it. The perfection of the bottles, the care taken with the labels, the silence of the victims, everything indicated planned, methodical, almost scientific behavior. But there was something that escaped logic. Because despite all her control, Clara didn't seem to seek power. She didn't want fame or money. She sought permanence, a way to stop time. And it was this need that ultimately betrayed her. One night, while caring for little Helena, a sweet, curious 6-year-old girl who claimed to see lights dancing whenever Clara approached, something got out of control. Perhaps the cut was deeper. Perhaps the observation time had gone too far. Helena didn't wake up. Clara's panic came not in the form of despair, but of silence. She put her to bed, adjusted the sheets, and watched for long minutes, as if waiting for her breathing to return on its own. Then she took the last bottle, filled it, and placed it in the center of the shelf. The label, unlike the others, had only one word: complete. From that point on, what was ritual became evidence. The smell began to spread through the house. The air lost its soapy sweetness and gained the heaviness of iron, and when the police finally entered, guided by a report from a mother worried about her nanny's disappearance, they found the bottles lined up, all clean, organized, and intact. What shocked the investigators was not just the content, but the form, the harmony, the coolness, the complete absence of chaos. It seemed like the work of someone who sincerely believed they were doing something good. Some criminologists have called the case a rationalized ritual of horror, a behavior where the crime is cloaked in logic and purpose. But the underlying truth was darker. Clara didn't want to kill, she wanted to preserve, and in trying to preserve it, he destroyed it. It's the cruel irony of control, the attempt to save something that, in the end, is lost precisely because it's touched too much. The most disturbing thing is to think that for so long, no one noticed. Because evil, when mixed with tenderness, becomes almost invisible. And Clara mastered this art. While the world saw an exemplary caregiver, within her grew a sick belief that she could stop the passage of time, imprisoning purity in small doses. Each bottle was, for her, a living memory, and deep down, perhaps that was what fascinated her most, the idea that she could capture what eludes us all: innocence, the moment, eternity. A desperate attempt to freeze what life inevitably consumes. The experts who analyzed the case said she suffered from extreme attachment disorder, developed from a childhood marked by abandonment and guilt. She didn't understand the concept of loss, said one of the psychologists. For Clara, nothing should disappear, not people, not feelings, not memories. And that's precisely where the story stops being just about crime and becomes about us, about what we try to keep alive inside us. Because on some level, we all have our own invisible little bottles, memories, loves, pains that we insist on holding on to, even when they should have long since gone. Now the difference is that Clara transformed this human instinct into a ritual. She turned attachment into a practice. She made love an experiment and time an enemy. And it was in this attempt to overcome the ephemeral that she ended up being devoured by it. Comment here. That makes sense to me. No one noticed the exact moment the air in the house changed temperature. It was one of those seemingly harmless late afternoons. Toys scattered about, the television playing low, the smell of bread warming in the oven. The girl asked for water, took 2 steps, and the world fell into place with the dry sound of her body hitting the floor. The fainting spell wasn't cinematic. It was silent, like everything else there. The nanny acted with her usual calm, the same calm that won over the neighborhood mothers. A cold towel on her forehead, sugar under her tongue, a soft voice saying, "It'll pass." But it didn't. In the ambulance, the pale child seemed asleep, and there was a bandage so small on her wrist that no one noticed. At the emergency room, the signs didn't add up. Cold skin, dizziness, an irregular heartbeat, a sign of loss with no visible wound, no medical history to justify it. The doctor on duty ordered tests. He asked for more light. He asked for silence. The partial report revealed what no one wanted to read: evidence consistent with recurrent blood loss. It wasn't much, but it was enough to raise alarm bells. The trembling mother repeated that her daughter was healthy, that she ate well, that she went to bed early, that she had been with the same caregiver for months because she's an angel. The doctor, in a low voice, asked if anyone other than the parents had routine access to the child. The question hung in the air like dust. A protocol was triggered. Mandatory notification. The word suspicion entered the file like a shadow. The patrol car pulled up without a siren. The first officer rang the doorbell like someone asking a neighbor for sugar. The house opened its white, fragrant mouth to welcome them. An organized living room, smiling photos, a vase of blue flowers on the table. The impeccable Nanny said, "Come in, of course." There was no mess or noise. The wall clock ticked a discreet, indifferent rhythm. The team split up. 2 in the kitchen, 1 in the hallway, 1 in the backyard. Within minutes it became clear that everything there followed an almost obsessive order. Labeled drawers, cloths folded by size, a diary with sleep times, meal times, and moods. Today he woke up crying. Today he laughed more. Too much care often hides too little. The smell came first, almost sweet, almost metallic, almost nothing. "It's spice," the nanny said, still smiling. But the human nose recognizes ancient stories, and that hint of iron in the air didn't come from bay leaves or cumin. The pantry had a cabinet in the back with a lace curtain covering the lower part. One of the officers bent down and touched the panel. New wood, a crack in the left corner. He pushed slowly. The world breathed harder. When the investigators opened the pantry cabinet, the metallic smell betrayed the secret. Behind the fake wood, shelves. Behind the shelves, rows. And on top of the rows, small glass bottles, all the same size, all with lids lined up, all with handwritten labels. Names, dates, little notes. The dark, thick liquid held the light like someone holding a secret. The procedure followed the manual's instructions. Isolation of the area, photographs, cataloguing, collection with gloves, and tweezers. What wasn't in the manual was the impression of harmony. There was no mess, no rush, no improvisation. There was method, repetition, signatures. In one corner, a box with scented white cloths. In another, empty, sterilized vials, ready to be filled. In the brown notebook, the serene handwriting: Wednesday, 5 millilli. Saturday, she dreamed of the sea. Monday, keep the laughter. The police chief wrote the word ritual on the pad, even though he knew courts prefer standard of conduct. Different names for the same hidden truth. The logic of horror resides in organization. At the hospital, the girl opened her eyes and asked for the nanny. Her mother cried silently. The doctor, a professional, took a deep breath and explained that some decisions would have to be made quickly. The psychological impact of discovering that danger lived within the home is a kind of pain that has no cure. Meanwhile, police cars grew larger on the street. Neighbors emerged from behind. Curtains, whispers, fingers pointed, memories tumbling over each other. She was always so calm. She made carrot cake. It helped when my son had a fever. The collective mentality tries to protect itself by denying what it sees. The neighborhood's journey from comfort zone to rupture took hours, and it all began with a dull sound on the living room floor. The nanny didn't run, didn't scream, didn't try to escape. She sat on the kitchen chair and folded her hands in her lap, as if waiting for tea. An officer read her rights. She nodded. They asked if there was anything she wanted to say. "I took care of them," she replied quietly. "I kept what is pure." The recording of that sentence was lost among technical terms, but whoever heard it didn't forget it. There are words that leave a mark, like a scar. At the police station, The interview was conducted calmly. She knew the names, the times, the dates. She remembered details that only those who observe too closely can retain. She spoke of her routine as if describing a prayer, without remorse, without anger, without haste. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because what happened there isn't just a police case. It's a mirror, a study in how the image of kindness can become an effective disguise when, on the other side, it encounters a community willing to believe. Behind the scenes of all trust lie microscopic choices we make without realizing it. It's the decision to ignore a small bandage. It's the ready-made excuse for a bizarre explanation. It's the relief of delegating care to someone who seems to have answers. This sum of small concessions builds the house where revelation arrives late. Experts called it a collection of biological evidence. Criminologists preferred a symbolic conservation system, big words for a simple abyss. Time, when it hurts, becomes an enemy, and there are those who spend their lives trying to tame it. The transformation we must undertake, accepting loss, change, flux, can turn into obstinacy and trembling hands. Clara transformed attachment into method, method into routine, routine into faith, and faith, detached from ethics, becomes a tunnel of no return. The most disturbing thing wasn't the existence of the vials, but the serenity of the shelf. The aesthetics of control speak volumes about the mindset of those who build it. The news outside the walls became a firestorm. News trucks, microphones, hurried debates about mental health, punishment, forgiveness. Some called for lynching, others for a report. On the internet, old profiles, photos of smiling children, comments of eternal gratitude for well-cared-for nights. The contrast between public images and private records produced a noise no one knew how to translate. Because the hidden truth doesn't fit in headlines, it requires time, nuance, listening, and none of it generates clicks. The emotional impact remained in homes, parents looking at discrete scars, remembering unexplained. Fevers, reviewing memories in a different light. Revelation, when it arrives, rewrites the past, and this too is a form of loss. The forensic report returned with details that sound almost cold, measured volumes, cross-referenced dates, confirmed compatibilities. There was no trade, no blackmail, no network. There was isolation. There was conviction. And, in a separate box, there were labels with dates that hadn't yet occurred, like someone making appointments with the future. That didn't easily fit into spreadsheets. It's difficult to quantify delusions that converse with the calendar. The decision to keep these labels sealed in an envelope illustrates a limit. Investigation reaches acts, but not always reaches beliefs. Meanwhile, neighborhood mothers stood on the sidewalk, unsure of how to look at each other. Guilt floated wildly. How did we not notice? She looked so good. I asked her to stay late myself. Community, when it comes to the surface, is made of cracks, and it's in those cracks that one chooses what to do with the pain. Some respond through anger, others through denial, a few through responsibility. It's this small core that begins to ask what needs to change. Protocols, listening, presence, attention, so that the next story isn't born the same. There isn't always an answer, but the right question is a start. At night, the house was empty. The kitchen light was off. In the room with the shelves, a square of lighter wall revealed the space where the furniture once stood. An echo of glass still seemed to vibrate in the ears of whoever had been inside. The neighbor across the street said the neighborhood seemed smaller. Perhaps that's what revelation does. It shrinks the world to fit what we can understand. But life doesn't shrink. It demands presence, and presence is seeing what we didn't want to see. The journey from now on isn't about demonizing a face, but about expanding our perspective, inward and outward. Some true crime cases become spectacles. This one shouldn't, because it invites us to a quieter, more honest conversation about boundaries, signals, and attention, about the small decisions that prevent major tragedies. It's not about living in fear, but about cultivating a kind of emotional vigilance that doesn't outsource everything to seemingly a good person. Goodness doesn't need spectacle. It needs discernment. This is perhaps the only revelation that truly changes behavior. And if all this seems heavy, that's because it is. But it can also be fruitful. Stories like these don't serve to paralyze. They serve to reorient, to restore the autonomy to ask more questions, to observe better, to balance trust and prudence. There's no ready-made formula. There's presence, and it's with presence that we weave meaning after the shock without losing the tenderness that makes us human. Write it down. I'm on that journey too. The courtroom was packed. The white lights, the sound of footsteps echoing on the marble floor, and the constant hubbub created an almost palpable tension. There she was, Clara, sitting in the dock, dressed with the same calm she always displayed. No trembling hands, no look of despair, just that same serene expression that confused everyone. It was as if she didn't grasp the gravity of what was happening, or perhaps worse, as if she understood too much. Prosecutors described her as cold, meticulous, and dangerous. Defense attorneys spoke of trauma, insanity, and lapses in reality. The truth, however, seemed to elude them all. No argument could fully explain how someone capable of demonstrating so much care could commit something so calculated. And perhaps that was the most disturbing thing. Clara didn't deny what she did. She just didn't see any wrongdoing in her actions. The experts presented the evidence, the catalogued bottles, the notebook with precise notes, the impeccable room that looked more like a laboratory. But among all the evidence, there was one detail that left even the most experienced experts speechless. Some of the bottles were labeled with future dates, days, months, and even years that hadn't yet arrived. When the investigators pointed this out, the entire courtroom fell silent. The judge leaned forward. The prosecutor asked, his voice almost trembling, "Why are those dates there, Clara?" And she, with the calm of someone explaining something obvious, replied, "Because it's not over yet." That phrase stuck in everyone's mind. No expert, psychiatrist or criminologist, has been able to fully decipher her meaning. Some believe Clara planned to continue the ritual, that future dates marked new victims, new fragments of purity to be preserved. Others, more inclined towards symbolic psychology, say it was a way of predicting eternity, a way of saying that what she preserved would live on, even after her. The fact is, to this day, no one is certain. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because this is the kind of case that shows how much the human mind can become a labyrinth. The psychiatric report pointed to complex disorders, dissociation, childhood trauma, delusions of redemption. But there was something beyond the diagnoses, a ritualistic mentality, an almost religious thought, centered around the idea of preserving what is good. Clara saw blood not as dirt, but as essence. She said that blood held memories, and that inside each little bottle was something that time could not destroy. During the trial, experts tried to translate that mystical language into medical terms. They mentioned obsessive-compulsive disorder, attachment disorder, dissociative personality disorder, but no definition seemed sufficient to contain the symbolic weight of it all. Because what Clara created wasn't just a crime, it was a belief system, a private universe with its own rules and meanings. She truly believed she was saving the children, not from themselves, but from the world. And that's where hidden truth, this case, reveals the danger is not always in cruelty, but in distorted faith. As the prosecution presented photos, records, and statements, Clara remained motionless. At times, she closed her eyes and whispered something inaudible, as if praying. When asked what she was saying, she replied, "I give thanks for those who are still pure." That simple phrase carried a kind of conviction that chilled the spine. It was impossible to decide what was more disturbing, what she was doing or how much she believed. She was doing the right thing, The sentence came after weeks of heated debate. The verdict, life imprisonment with mandatory psychiatric monitoring. On the day the decision was read, she didn't cry or protest. She simply looked around at the people and said, in an almost maternal tone, "You still don't understand. No one is safe from time." That was her last public statement. The newspapers did what they do best. They turned tragedy into a spectacle. Headlines, interviews, theories, podcasts, e-books. The Barbadas Garafinhas case became a phenomenon, fueling morbid curiosity and collective fear. People wanted explanations, but what they received were interpretations. And when the answers don't satisfy, the void grows. The same void Clara seemed to want to fill. Behind the scenes of the investigation, a curious fact remains. The bottles with future dates were stored in an evidence room under heavy security. No expert wanted to open those caps again. They say the liquid is still intact, as if time had truly stopped inside. Others claim that some labels have begun to fade, except for those with dates that haven't yet arrived. Coincidence or not, this keeps alive the mystery that no one has been able to erase. And it's precisely this kind of mystery that leaves its mark, because deep down, Clara's case is about decisions, the ones we take and the ones we don't. It speaks to the impact of a mind so isolated within itself that it creates a world where the absurd makes sense, and at the same time, it speaks to us about how much we trust appearances, about the comfort we feel in labeling evil as disease, just so we don't have to see what it reflects about humanity itself. The transformation this story provokes lies not in the answer, but in the question it poses. To what extent is sanity a stable line? How many of us, faced with pain or fear, have distorted reality to continue believing in something? Perhaps the difference between Clara and the rest of the world is simply the limit each person is capable of respecting. Even after the conviction, there are still those who dream about her. People who swear they saw the reflection of small bottles in abandoned windows. A retired investigator said that, while reviewing the evidence inventory, he noticed something strange. A new bottle, unnumbered and unlabeled, stored among the others. When they went to check, the record was gone. No one knew where it had come from. No record, no signature, and most disturbing, the liquid inside looked fresh. Not even the experts could understand what those dates meant, and perhaps that's for the best. There are secrets that don't belong in the logical world, secrets that live in the space between trauma and myth, between science and the inexplicable. Comment here. That makes sense to me. What's most frightening about stories like Clara's isn't the blood, the crime, or even the mystery of the little bottles. What's truly disturbing is the idea that she spent years among ordinary people, smiling, caring, living, without anyone noticing the abyss hidden behind her serene gaze. It's as if evil has learned to walk hand in hand with sweetness, as if monstrosity has learned to wear perfume and clean clothes. And that's when the story stops being just about her and starts talking about us, about how much we trust, how much we pretend not to see, how much we believe in what's most convenient, because deep down, everyone wants to believe they can. Recognize danger, that evil comes disguised as a shadow, that it gives clear signs, that it's predictable. But what if it isn't? What if it's in the friendly smile of your neighbor, the handshake of a stranger, or even the hug of someone you think you know? This is the most uncomfortable part, realizing that sometimes evil doesn't hide in the darkness. It hides in normality. Clara was normal, too normal, and perhaps that was her greatest weapon, because evil doesn't need to seem extraordinary to make an impact. It just needs to be ignored long enough. And we, as a society, are masters at ignoring what bothers us. The small inconsistencies, the subtle attitudes, the behaviors that don't fit. How many times have you had a strange feeling about someone, but preferred to ignore it? How many times has instinct tried to warn you, and reason replied, no, it must just be an impression? Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because there's a hidden truth we rarely face head-on. Evil doesn't just destroy when it acts, it also destroys when it's allowed, and permission often comes from indifference. Clara's story is, above all, a story about mentality, about how one mistaken belief can become a whole map of wrong decisions. She believed she was saving children, that she was preserving something the world no longer deserved, and when a weakened mind finds a distorted purpose, a dangerous conviction is born. Experts who studied the case say she felt no guilt. That's what sets her apart from a common criminal. Clara believed in every gesture, every ritual. She believed the little bottles were small capsules of salvation, that blood contained pure memories, intact emotions, the innocence she herself had lost. At a certain point, she stopped distinguishing what was real from what was symbolic. And that's where the true darkness of the human mind lies, when faith becomes justification. Psychology calls this the rationalization of evil. It's when someone creates a narrative to support their own mistake, until the mistake no longer seems like a mistake. And this happens far beyond cases like hers. It occurs in people who hurt for the sake of good, who control out of love, who judge out of justice. This is when morality becomes an excuse, and right and wrong switch places without us even realizing it. Clara was merely the extreme mirror of this mechanism, a portrait of how far someone will go when they believe they are the only guardian of purity. The curious thing is that after her arrest, many still defended her. Some said she needed help, not punishment. Others claimed she wasn't aware of what she was doing. But few asked what was inside the people who admired her so much before, and why no one realized what she truly was. The answer perhaps lies in our need to believe that good is always obvious, that it shines, that it is transparent, that it doesn't deceive. But reality is more complex. Sometimes good and evil blend together in such a way that they become indistinguishable, like two voices whispering the same melody in different tones. And when this happens, society reacts with fear, because it's easier to believe in distant monsters than to accept that they might be among us, or worse, within us. Clara, deep down, is a symbol of human fragility, of how much a mind can distort itself trying to correct its own past, of how much the search for purity can generate destruction. She's the portrait of someone who wanted to be good and, in the attempt, crossed the line of what is human. And that's precisely why this story continues to resonate, because it doesn't end with the sentence, nor with the prison sentence. It continues in the unanswered questions, in the silence of the little bottles with future dates, in the feeling that something is still unfinished. The experts closed the case, the lawyers moved on, the neighborhood returned to normal. But no one sleeps the same after knowing that danger can have gentle hands and calm eyes. There's a silent transformation that happens in those who hear stories like these, a kind of wake-up call that changes the way they see the world. It's not fear, it's awareness. It's as if, after meeting Clara, it's impossible to trust blindly again. And maybe that's the point. Trust, yes, but with awareness. Love, yes, but without erasing the signs, because innocence is beautiful but blind, and evil, when it realizes this, knows exactly where to hide. The human journey is full of paradoxes. We all have a side that cares, and another that dominates, a side that protects and another that fears. Clara only let fear decide for her. She transformed pain into method, guilt into mission, love into control. And that's why her case is so disturbing, because in some way it speaks to all of us. It speaks to the fine line between right and wrong, to what happens when we let trauma dictate our actions. And in the end, there is a question that echoes like a whisper. How far can someone pretend to be good? Because evil rarely presents itself with warning. It disguises itself as empathy, care, and concern. And before we know it, it's already inside, comfortable, and deeply rooted. How many people like Clara are still out there, behind kind faces and calm smiles? How many live trapped in their own illusion of doing good while spreading destruction? We may never know. What we know is that the truth, when it finally comes out, changes everything. And revelation, however, painful, is the first step toward transformation, because darkness doesn't disappear when we pretend it doesn't exist. It only weakens when exposed. Comment here. That makes sense to me. If you've made it this far, it's because some part of this story truly touched you. Perhaps curiosity, perhaps reflection, or perhaps that uneasiness that only true stories can evoke. And that's precisely why I want to invite you to stay with me. This channel is a space for those who enjoy delving deep into the truths the world prefers to hide, behind the scenes of the human mind, into the decisions that reveal who we are when no one is looking. So, if this type of content makes sense to you, if these stories make you think differently, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next ones. Here, each new video is a new revelation, a new look at what lies behind what we call normality. And if you felt like you stayed until the end for a reason, comment there. I'm with you until the end. I want to know who stayed with me throughout this entire journey, because it's this kind of connection that gives me the strength to continue bringing stories like this. Real, dense, human. And before you go, leave your like. He is the silent sign that it was worth sharing this moment, this conversation, this uncomfortable truth. There's a video here that complements this subject, further deepening this same feeling of doubt and fascination. Click and continue with me there, because some stories only make sense when we have the courage to listen to the end.